Alright, today we're going to be tearing into a 1998 Honda Trx450, and this is the Foreman. So it's the S and the ES. The ES is the electric shift, and there's just some slight differences with the shift mechanism. Other than that, these motors are very, very similar. So we're going to go ahead start by pulling the top end apart, pull the head cover, the cylinder head, the cylinder and the piston. Then we're going to go over, pull clutch assembly, pull the camshaft out, and then go over and do the stator and the flywheel, recoil, push rod, and then split that case. So the first thing we're going to do, 10 millimeters around this top cover here, and there's just 4 of them. And then underneath there you've got your rockers and your push rods. We've got 14 millimeters holding this rocker arm on. And these are all going to be torqued down when we go back together. And then we've got 2 10 millimeter bolts right down here on the side that we need to pull loose. And then it is as simple as that, pulling this head off. These are easy where they've got their camshaft down inside of the crankcase. So this rocker now could come off. That's what it looks like there. We've adjusted the valves on another video there. You can watch that. And to pull this rocker, or this shaft going through there, just pull this 10 millimeter and that shaft will slide out. And then you're able to replace these rocker arms. Push rods are here. Obviously your exhaust valve, your intake valve are there. Then once we get these 2 10 millimeter bolts out, this head will just be able to slide off here. A lot of times that gasket underneath this cylinder head will cause it to stick a little bit, but we've got 2 dowel pins, one on either side, and this just kind of lines up the gasket as well as the cylinder, so it's the cylinder head, so it's perfectly right where it needs to be on the cylinder. This is the head gasket here. Never want to reuse those; we just throw those away. Same way with the base gasket, which is under the cylinder. There's your valves there, your intake, your exhaust. Exhaust is slightly smaller on this model. And then we've got, again, 2 10 millimeters to pull to get that cylinder off. Pull those out quick. Same thing, a lot of times this gasket kind of holds this up. If you've got to pry it at all, you want to make sure you do it in a spot where it's not going to break a fin. These fins will break very, very easily. But that gasket kind of sticks a lot of times, so sometimes you do have to use a little bit of force. We've got some scoring in here, which is why we're tearing this motor apart. Quite a bit of scoring, and you can see on that cylinder there that we won't reuse this. It will need bored out. To remove this piston, I take a pick with an angle on it and come in from the side here in one of those grooves, and you can just pull that clip out. If we were putting this piston back together, you reusing this piston, I would put this clip back in after we pull this pin out, just to keep everything together. But as scored as this one is, we won't be reusing it. Then we can just take and tap that piston out. You want to make sure when you're doing that you don't get down into the crank with your screwdriver and score that up. So there's your piston there. You can see the damage that's done all the way around there. And this side's fairly good, but if any side of that piston's damaged, you don't want to reuse it. So we've got our cam chain tensioner right here, and if we're just pulling it apart, all you'd need to do is take these 10 millimeters out. We're gonna pull this center so that when we're going back together, it'll be ready to go. Sometimes with a Phillips screw, these can be a bit of a challenge, but if you tap on it and have a good screwdriver, you can pull it out there. And then you take 10 millimeter then. This will then just kind of pop out of there. And there is your cam chain tensioner there. I'm going to pull clutch cover now so we can pull that camshaft. And so you can see it, I'll take a block, stick it underneath here. We'll see how long this will last before it falls off. There we go. To adjust the clutch, what you do is take a 14 millimeter wrench, and you don't have to pull the motor to do this, but take a 14 millimeter wrench, loosen it up there. We've got a flathead screw right in the middle, and what I do is go until, this style might be a little bit different, but you can decrease your play by turning it counterclockwise, increase it by turning it clockwise. And so then when you get it set right, you want to take your screwdriver then, hold it into place, and then you can tighten down your lock nut there. You want to make sure you tighten that down. Oil lines came in here, but those were removed when we pulled that motor. Oil filter on this side here. Those are 8 millimeters to remove that filter. If you're doing any kind of motor work at all, you want to replace that oil filter. A lot of times, no matter if you drain the oil or not, there's a little bit of oil left in there. 10 millimeters all the way around this clutch cover here. We'll go ahead and remove those. Thirteen of those 10 millimeters all the way around. That coupler was going up to the front, so I just pulled that. There's an O-ring in here that kind of holds that. Does a pretty good job of holding it, so that's why we had to tap it off. Now what I do is take and put a little pressure up, and you don't have to do a whole lot. Tap on it, and that a lot of times will break that seal free. And then you're able just to lift it off just like that. So clutch cover is off there. We've got centrifugal clutch. Here's the arm that we were adjusting, if you can see that there. We're going in and out, putting pressure on this here. We've got the centrifugal clutch here, we've got clutch basket here, and the camshaft back here. We're trying to get to that camshaft to show you that, so I'm going to keep on digging down there. We don't, I believe, have to pull this centrifugal clutch to get to the camshaft, but I'm just going to do it so you're able to see it a little more clearly. Tip this up even farther. There you go. Now you should be able to see a little bit better. This is 1 1/16 inch to pull this nut here. I like to hold it, keep everything from spinning. Just regular threads, so turn that counterclockwise. and we'll just pull that off. Now, sometimes these can be a challenge to come off of there, and you've got to use a hammer. They do make a puller that you can use to help pull that off, but we'll try tapping on it with a hammer. Obviously, you don't want to do it in an area that's going to damage anything. You don't need to use a very big hammer, nor do you need to hit very hard. Alright, then we're able to get that centrifugal clutch off there. You can just pull it up like that. There's your centrifugal clutch. We'll check specs on that. We've got your one-way bearing inside here, and this allows the centrifugal clutch to spin one direction. So we're holding it just the way it was. You cannot let this centrifugal clutch freewheel in the clockwise direction. So when you pull it out, make sure that your bearing is showing the outside when you're looking at it like this. So that's the housing there. You want to make sure that that isn't grooved, and this gear will stay on there until we pull this centrifugal clutch here. This shift arm just pulls off there. And then 4 10mm to hold this clutch. And I do this in a crisscross pattern. Able to get those 4 off there. Springs can come off. And then if you're replacing plates, we'll pull this nut here. Well, I guess even just pulling this off will pull it. Same thing, counterclockwise to remove that. And then this just pulls up just like that. And they've got a spacer in behind here that we'll want to make sure and put back there. Now we can put these springs back in there. Plate goes back down on top. All right, do that in a crisscross pattern again. Now you're able to just pull this out separately, and it keeps all those plates together. Keep those from going everywhere. If you're just going to replace the basket, or that'll keep everything in place. Otherwise, those plates seem to slip, and then you can't get everything lined up. Just more of a challenge. So now your centrifugal, the back gear here, will just pop right off, and we can pull that camshaft at this time. So your guides are here. This is where the cam chain tensioner was pressing down on top of. Here's your other guide here, and that one just slips out of there. So to remove this guide here, you got 2 10mm bolts. Slips out. Now to remove this, I like to put tension on this so it doesn't spin or try to spin. And then we're able to take that sprocket off, and that's your cam chain sprocket there, as well as the chain. We'll keep those together. 12mm, holding this camshaft in. Now this push rod caps are down below there, and they seem to fall out when we pull this cam. So I like to take and pull them out before they fall down into that motor. And also these kind of drop down and hold that cam from coming out. So if we pull them out there, that kind of eliminates that problem. You've got to wiggle this camshaft in different directions to try to get it out of there. And there's your camshaft there. I'm going to take and put the sprocket back on here. Next, we're going to pull that oil pump. Three 10mm bolts holding that oil pump on. And then when we pull this, the little keeper behind this oil pump is what's holding this guide on. So that's what was holding us up there. A shift mechanism. 10mm. And this is spring loaded back here, so kind of be careful pulling that apart. And now we can pull this shift shaft up and out of there. I guess not yet. We're going to flip this motor over now and pull that stator. Going to remove that recoil pull starter, and that's 8mm. And there's 4 of them, but we already had 3 of them off, so we just had 1. And the way this recoil works, that you pull on this rope here and this arm comes out, grabs this pulley gear here and spins that motor. So a lot of times on these recoil pull starters, you'll have an issue where this will be sticking in. So when you pull it, it's not touching this cup at all, not turning your motor over. Or a lot of times these can break, the spring wears out, or the rope just breaks off and spins inside of here. So make sure, even if you have electric start, so you don't get stranded, you've got your pull starter. Got a boot here that we remove with a Phillips screwdriver. And it's a pretty bent. We'll try prying it off here. This clamp will need to be replaced. $17mm to pull this cup off of here. Then keep it from spinning, I stick my finger right on that gear. Then you're just able to pull that off there. Several different sensors here, and then we've got your stator here. This sensor is off there. This sensor can stay on this cover unless you're wanting to replace that separately. Just to pull this cover, you don't have to remove that sensor. Reverse is down below here, 10mm holding that arm on. And that's the reverse arm there. And I'll show you the shaft when we get that pulled that far. Now to pull your stator cover, you don't have to remove any of this stuff around this. So to replace your stator and your flywheel, which is a fairly common thing to replace, all you've got to do is remove recoil pull starter that's here, your cup that's here, and these 10mm bolts around this outside. So 11 bolts around the outside of that. And then this cover should be ready to come off of there. It won't take very much work to pull that cover off. You want to replace that gasket when you're coming apart, or that O-ring, I guess. But then that stator, stator is here, flywheel is here. We've got your idler gears here, and your starter shaft that comes out there. This is a stator. I can show you how to test that in a separate video to test and see if that's good. Got your idlers. We can pull this one out. The other one will probably be stuck down. To remove your flywheel, then you take a puller here, your motion puller, run it down in there. Take your impact, hold your flywheel, and spin it, and that'll just pull right off of there. So you can take, there's your flywheel there's your starter gear, and that is only one way as well. So you want to make sure that you have the correct bearing in there, make sure that's working properly. So that is replacing a flywheel.